Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hello, Ask.
Hello. Me.
If our audience who is watching us on YouTube may notice that we are in the middle of the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, which is a place I prefer to be, even though right by this window it is very hot, to be honest, but it's okay.
Yes, so I guess if the sun sets to the west and we're heading this way, what did you describe that?
We're going west.
Right.
So we're headed to the sun.
Oh, the sun's that way.
Well, the sun's kind of there,
Yeah.
and we're headed that way.
Well, I think we just showed how you have a good sense of direction.
Okay. Anyways, we owe a Miask podcast, meant to get one recorded before the big Wallam anniversary event, which was October 11. Leading up to that was a bit of madness. Those of you, shout out, love all of you patrons on Patreon, who have now gotten to get the whole behind the scenes on the madness that was. I am planning to record, especially for my patrons on Patreon. It's a little tongue twister, but a kind of more in-depth description of the events. I already blogged about it, so they have access to that. And if you would like to be a patron, you can also have access to that exclusive content. But there was this really cool star map, and I'm gonna space nerd out. But I digress. We are at sea, as our viewers online can see. And for those of you not online, we are literally floating in the middle of the ocean.
So you said, let's do a podcast. And I said, why don't we start it with one of the things that we like doing every time that we go on vacation and we get a chance to walk around a city. Mm-hmm. And that is, you really enjoy libraries and bookstores.
Correct. It's actually become kind of our favorite spot. Anytime we do a city walk, we usually happen upon a bookstore or I have them bookmarked.
Right. Yeah. Right. So what was cool is that in one of the places we stopped in, which you wouldn't think, was this house or manor in England, and they happened to have a bookstore. And immediately I was like, you know what? It was a used books for really low, very inexpensive. And I guess it helps with the maintenance of the manor.
All right. Just, this is totally going to go off subject. But where we were was Pemberley 1, meaning we were at the Pemberley filming location of Pride and Prejudice, the BBC version, I want to say 2005, maybe earlier, 90s. Anyways, the Colin one. But we were at, I think it's called Chatsworth. Nope, sorry. That's the newer one. We were at Lime Park. So Lime Estate, which is the big estate home, and we'll throw up some fun photos of us dressed in our regalia, in our British proper top hat to the cane for you and bonnet for me, but it was so much fun. But yes, that estate, which is now a national trust, they call it, is funded by visitors like ourselves, but they did have a gently used or not a book swap per se, but open donation. They had a suggested donation amount on the inside of the flat, but it was pretty cool because in that lower level, after we, went around in our get-ups, we were able to kind of check out the bookstore, and you actually saw a book that you wanted immediately on the shelves.
Yeah, so it had a great cover. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. McIlvaney Unboxing, and the photo has a picture of Mike Tyson swinging on somebody, and on the cover, anyone who admires writing as muscular as it is graceful should buy this book. And I said, that speaks to me. I want to get this book, and it was suggested 2.5 pounds.
Yes, 2.5 pounds, which is almost $5 really, but well worth the purchase, I guess. But you're not quite finished yet.
Yeah, so I just started it, and what I said is, what we should do is we should share the book that we chose, because when we travel, we don't. Is really the only time that we get to really sit down and read the idea of
proper
the idea of sitting down and reading is very enticing, and I look back fondly at all the times that I do that. But I consume most of my what would have been reading through the audio format. So, so I got 65 pages in through. This is basically.
But show our audience how small that type font is, because I got to tell you, I would need like magnifying glass because
Yeah, it's small type font. So so basically, this
really
guy
tiny.
is a sports writer for a British newspaper. Say he's a living legend in sports journalism, and he says he starts and ends this book with Muhammad Ali, who he calls the Alpha and the Omega. Actually, I think Muhammad Ali's aunt said he's the Alpha and the Omega after he won one of his fights, and so he used that to kind of build the book out. So what I said was, one, we'll show the book that we chose,
Okay.
and then maybe one line to say, hey, you know what, this is actually a pretty good book. So this line that I'm going to read is basically, Muhammad Ali was fighting in the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman.
I remember that.
Which, if you're a boxing fan or of boxing history, then Muhammad Ali was in his late 20s. He's coming back from having the title stripped from him because of his not wanting to participate in the draft for the Vietnam War. And so he's basically lost his peak years. And so George Foreman is this ascending figure who's just destroying everyone in the first few rounds, just a few punches. And people don't like the way that George Foreman boxes, but he's so strong that he knocks out everyone. So one of Muhammad Ali's, two people who beat Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, and I forget the other, it was a British boxer, I think something Norton. Both of them beat Muhammad Ali in the past. George Foreman destroyed them. Like, he just ran through them. So everyone's like, he's not going to win. But this is just 2 lines of this writer talking about after the fight, post-fight. And it just goes to show what a good writer he is. He says, we should have known that Muhammad Ali would not settle for any ordinary old resurrection. His had to have an additional flourish. So having rolled away the rock, he hit George Foreman on the head with it. It's freaking, I love that.
And why? Why do you love it? I actually read the title of the chapter because I love that too.
The title of this chapter is called The Greatest Again. The Greatest, comma, again. And because he's using things that I don't even know how to explain, because I love reading, but I don't know how to define things like alliteration or allegories, analogies, whatnot. But basically, he talks about Muhammad Ali's resurrection back to fighting, right?
Yes.
Similarities to Jesus resurrecting, rolling away the rock, which is, on the 3rd day Jesus was resurrected or whatnot.
Right,
and basically
and
they roll the rock away. Yeah. But this line of, he had to have this additional flourish, so having rolled away the rock, he hit George Foreman on the head with it. I'm like, this guy's just a good writer. And so I think sports journalists, because of the editing process maybe in newspapers, they have to be very concise, and they have to be able to be very specific with words. And so the really cool thing with this one, which is a good one, another reason why it's good to pick up is because they're short chapters that are either, here's what this fighter was going through pre-fight, or maybe here's what the fighter was going post-fight, or here's explaining the actual fight. And so you can pick it up, read a few pages, set it down. McIlvaney on boxing. I can't wait for him to write about Mike Tyson and see what he says. But anyway, that's my book.
Okay.
What about yours?
Well, you actually kind of helped pick my book because there wasn't anything that really spoke to me. So to be fair,
Well, the ones that spoke to you, I had already read.
The ones that spoke to me, I had already read. To be fair, you really picked my book, and it is N.W. by Zadie Smith.
Yes, I read a book of hers, White Teeth, and there are certain times where people are just good writers, and you hesitate to recommend them because some people want a gripping story, a fast-paced story, a love story, a romance story, a violent story. I don't know, and I don't know if her writing can be described as all that. It can just be described as really good writing, really deep into building characters. It takes time, right?
Yeah, so I am only on page 32, to be fair. So it's really hard for me to judge the book. But the very first page actually the very first line, and I'm no like book aficionado or whatever, right? But you just kind of know when something is like good writing. There's good storytelling, there's good writing, there's easy storytelling and easy reading, like where we say we'll binge watch, a Netflix show and it's just easy watching or whatever, whereas it's like, all right, buckle in for Schindler's List, or what's our favorite on HBO, the Band of Brothers, or you're not always in the mood for really good storytelling, and necessarily sometimes you just want candy, right? I just want to watch something that's going to make me laugh or just kind of check out. But this definitely is requiring a bit more cerebral power and focus. But what's interesting is the first couple of pages is literally, and this type font is super tiny compared to the regular book, because it's literally like every publication ever just praising this book and her writing. I mean, everything from Time Magazine to the Daily Telegraph to the Daily Beast to Los Angeles Times, USA Today, Toronto Star, like every type of publication just basically calls it like brilliant and stimulating, and things like, best novel of the year, possibly decade. So this like kind of sets you up, which I don't love, because then it's like, well, this has to be good. And then, I'd rather something be kind of like no expectations. But I will read where I said, okay, Oscar, I want you to know, like, this is definitely good writing. Whether or not I get it, it's a whole nother thing. But I said, this is how you know this is somebody who knows how to write. And having interviewed and had many conversations with many amazing writers, I have an appreciation for it. Whether or not, we'll see how far I get. I mean, I hope to finish it, and I hope I do feel the way all of these people who have given it acclaim do. But anyway, here's the beginning of my book, which listeners who have read this already, or viewers who are watching, if you would like to write in and explain to me this first paragraph, I would love that. But here we go. And I think it's kind of like a prelude to the story, so it's not like we're jumping right in. But the fat sun stalls by the phone masts. Anti-climb paint turns sulfurous on school gates and lampposts. In Williston, people go barefoot. The streets turn European. There is a mania for eating outside. She keeps to the shade, red-headed. On the radio, I am the sole author of the dictionary that defines me. A good line. Write it out on the back of a magazine. In a hammock, in the garden of a basement flat, fenced in on all sides.
Yeah, that's good writing. So what's interesting about that is that in that line, in that paragraph,
yes,
there is a line which sort of answers or starts to answer a question that I had while you were reading it, which is, where do writers get these ideas for this is a good line? Like, so there it says, write it in the back of a magazine, right? Or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was awesome, because do writers sometimes just
grab whatever's there
and they go, wow, that's a really good line. Okay, let me write that down. Let me hold on to this line.
The ones I've spoken to often keep something with them. Okay, pre-iPhone smartphone device where you could take notes or do a voice thing, most of them did carry something around or always had like a notebook handy. Like
right.
Most people say that, I mean, the good writers that I know do have things that they jot things down.
Right, and then not the opposite, then kind of the way that these novels can be written possibly is like they kind of take their time. Okay, now I'm going to sit down and write this, but I have time to kind of put this chapter together unless there's some kind of deadline. And then on the other side is the book that I have, which is if you're writing on the rumble in the jungle, a fight that happened, whatever the day, let's say the day was a Saturday, and they need to post something that's ready to go either that night or that morning, then again, where do they come up with those sentences, like that analogy of the rolling of the rolling of the rock, and the allegory to the
story of
biblical
Jesus.
myth. Yeah, to the biblical myth. Sorry to offend anyone. The biblical stories. So I find that the idea of the process fascinating, because this brings me to like the next step to what we were going to talk about. But before we do that, you've been reading more than one book.
I've been reading 3 books, to be fair. And so Now, I probably should have just purchased it in paperback and been carrying it around. But since, 2 cruises ago, I've been reading The Martian because I loved the audiobook for Project Hail Mary. And I remember liking the movie The Martian way back in the day before I was really more of an avid book reader. But Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir is so good, and there's a movie coming out, so we're super psyched. But I was like, you know what? Even though I know the story, I realize now, now that I read like 100 plus or listen to 100 plus books a year, and most of the books I listen to are formulaic, but it doesn't matter that I know how things are going to end. It's the journey, it's a story, it's like bringing me along the way, what little anecdotes, what little things will make me laugh or cry or be sad or mad at or whatever. So I realized, like, no, it doesn't matter if I know because I watched the movie yet. Let me read the book. And I love The Martian
I know.
so much. I've been asking Oscar to please book club with me and read this.
I can't read on a screen the way you can, so I have to get the book.
Yeah, and I think I want to get this anyway to have on my shelf because I love it so much. But because of that, I've had it like on library checkout like 50 times, and it keeps picking up from where I left off. And the thing is, I could just scroll through this and pick any page and read something, and it would be really funny and brilliant. But what I wanted to read was this part because I feel like it's least representative of why I like this book, which is because it's so funny, and Watney, the lead character, is just freaking hilarious. And basically, it's his journal, so you can just pick it up at any time, which is why it's spanned literally like several cruises now that I've been trying to finish and read this. But this one was kind of cool because it was science-y, yet like very, very much a jumping off point to make you kind of think. And I think those are really good writers as well. But also, unlike the very, astute and very, advanced, I wouldn't say, what's the word I'm looking for, but eloquent and very, Zadie Smith, like the way she writes, it's a little bit more like, okay, you got to focus. Like this reading is just like super fast reading. And it's just, even though it gets really deep into the science, but he says, this is obviously, if you don't know what The Martian is about, it's basically, astronaut gets stranded on Mars and he's just, it's
and
like
start movie.
Yeah, and go, right. So anyway, he's obviously doing a journal, and so most of these are his journal entries. And so this part is where he's, doing one of his projects of survival, and he's talking about why something went wrong. And so he's like, my guess is pockets of ice formed around some of the bacteria, because he's talking about he would grow these potatoes, and basically with the potatoes, the airlock or whatever got opened, and then he lost his crop. But some of the bacteria survived, and what he needs to get potatoes growing again is bacteria to have life, right, in the soil. So he said, my guess is pockets of ice formed around some of the bacteria, leaving a bubble of survivable pressure inside, and the cold wasn't quite enough to kill them. With hundreds of millions of bacteria, it only takes one survivor to stave off extinction. Life is amazingly tenacious. They don't want to die any more than I do.
Yeah, so what's cool about Project Hail Mary and The Martian is one, I don't know if he hits it 100% of the time, but I know that it's very deeply scientifically researched. And so to be able to do that and make it entertaining just shows why The Martian sold 1 billion books and became a movie, so he's just a good writer.
He's just a good writer. But I mean, I love that concept because we think about, crops die all the time, or whatever the case may be, or are we all going to be extinct soon, or whatever the things are. But it's like literally the thought of him saying in this thing, there's millions of bacteria. Like you read your thing of probiotics, and it's like, all these different strands of whatever. But like the thought that only one thing has to survive, or for like life to start, only one thing has to be there to kind of give it that spark, is uniquely hopeful and depressing at the same time. Yep. Like, oh my God, we're only down at the last, brink of life or last hope. But then at the same time, it's kind of super hopeful because only one little strand needs to survive. So I thought it was cool because we are resilient as humans, And then we're not going to talk about this one, but I've been trying to learn. My goal of being a polyglot is not working out too well, but you always said in order to learn a new language, you can try to read something you've read a million times or that you know really well, or watch a movie and stuff. So we always do as well stop by a local comic book store, whatever country we're in, which is...
If we can find it.
If we can find it, but we've been lucky. We've found so many. So we were in Vigo, Spain, walking. Didn't mean to run into it, but there it was, Vigo Comics, and I picked up my favorite, Lazarus Uno. That means one, for those of you that don't know.
I'm glad that you
And so
clarified.
I am trying to learn Spanish, and it took me 10 minutes to read page 1 of this comic, which is really interesting because comics is the kind of thing you can reread and relook at because of the art. This page is going to be much quicker, see, because there's only one little dialogue box here. But what's cool about it is it allows you to kind of slow down through the read process. So these were my purchases and my books. And yes, we love to read and slow down when we're on vacation and actually take to physical reading.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say on that is that, so you've been reading The Martian for 2 years. You know Lazarus, and you love everything about Lazarus and Greg Rucka. Zadie Smith, you saw
Respect.
all of the, but you don't know anything about her. You've never read anything about her. But
No.
you looked at and saw all of the acclaim, and then right from the first paragraph, you're like, wow, that's a really good written sentence.
Yes.
And the same with this writer. I was like, wow, look at this one line. It's so good. It just makes me wonder of our enjoyment of certain things like that are sometimes enhanced because we have not a preconceived notion, but we've had an expectation that's been set. So you've been reading The Martian for a long time, and so you can find anything. But part of it is because you've been enjoying it the whole time, right? So that kind of enhances the experience, or it makes us more amenable to enjoying it. And in the reverse could be the same for this book by Zadie Smith, because you don't normally read books like that. You may halfway through be like, you know what, this is not for me, which is totally fine. I think we have a limited amount of time, so you shouldn't try to force yourself through things that you don't enjoy. But it's interesting how maybe some of these authors can capture us, and that then can help us finish their work. So anyway, that's the thought that I had while you were reading your lines. The next thing is, since we were talking about writing stuff, is I weekly send out a blog post to our Kung Fu students, and I also put it out to our newsletter list for Kung Fu students. And so the process for that is usually I am listening to podcasts or reading something or catch something. I'm like, wow, I really like this line, this one, or maybe this little theme, and I'll write it down somewhere, or I'll capture it somewhere, and I'll go back and look and go, can I build some of this out to then make a blog post about it for Kung Fu, Tai Chi, or fitness? So the things that I hold on to are in 2 categories. One, can I use it for while I'm Kung Fu, while I'm Tai Chi, Control Your Health, Fitness, to write a blog post about? Or 2, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe Mimi and I will talk about it. Or maybe this is just for me to get a deeper understanding of, like, I hear something on religion, which I'm always fascinated by, right? And I'll just jot that down. So that they're the 2 blocks. But when you said, hey, we're going to podcast, I said, all right, well, listen, I was just been writing stuff down on this journal. And the things that I wrote down, I said, I could do the same thing for the podcast. Can I take bits and pieces and then say, okay, here's how to structure a conversation? Because I know that if I just bring something up, you can talk about anything. Right? Because you have opinions. Right?
Well, I have opinions. And for our viewers online, of course I love Oscar, but I'm leaning towards him because it's so hot by this window. I'm like drenched in sweat. Like, I'm trying to avoid the severe set of the sun that is setting upon me, and it is so hot by this window, and it's like 10 degrees cooler on the other side of the camera.
But it's not good enough for
but
the
it's
shot.
not a good shot. Like, don't you guys want to enjoy the ocean? So for my audio listeners, just entertain me for this once, and click on this YouTube video, because I'm suffering through this just so I can get
And you're
a
suffering
nice
also
shot.
because you have to always be on my right side.
Yeah, I know.
Because the left, it's cooler here.
Of course. All right, go
So,
on.
Anyways, first thing is I've been listening to a guy, Dr. Michael Gervais, who's a sports psychologist who I think became popular with Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks when they went like 2 Super Bowls in a row. They didn't win both, but they won one, and then they went the second time.
Okay.
And they lost to this like little well-known team, the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. But whatever, that's besides the point. But anyway, first thing that I wrote down is this concept of learning to be completely yourself. Like that should be maybe a goal or something, and that everything that you need is already inside you. There's nothing that you need from another person to be completely yourself. And I like the way he phrased that, because if you hear it in a different way, it could be, if I were just to write everything you need is already inside you, I don't really know if that's true. But the next sentence I do believe, which is there's nothing you need from another person to be completely yourself. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think I agree with you with how like the first line you're like, well, I don't know, because to me sometimes maybe because I've been around you for so long, and we were kind of laughing about this, not laughing, but like literally on this trip, I think maybe there's been 12 minutes that Oscar and I haven't spent time in the same vicinity, because he had to run up to get my mask for the theater that one time, and then I had to run downstairs today for about 10 minutes, 6 minutes or something. So
it was 9 minutes and 57 seconds.
So our exposure has been pretty high, since 1996. But I feel like people who play an important role in my life shape who I am, right? And then to kind of know who I am, yes, like being alone or just like kind of having my self-reflection is one thing, but I feel like it's through the reciprocal nature of relationships for me, or like how I react to things, that help me understand who I am, right? So I do feel like for me, like that connectivity to others helps me kind of know myself best, because how would I know how I was going to react in a situation if I'm, just alone all the time? But I may be dissecting this wrong.
No,
like the
actually, here's the next line, which I was going to wait till later, but it's basically what you said, which is, but we are a community, and so we need relationships.
Yeah.
The essence of a relationship has to start with the essence of the relationship with yourself. So you kind of still have to know yourself also. So, but it's both of them are growing at the same time. But that concept of,
it's a little chicken and eggy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a little bit chicken and eggy. But I guess the thing is, this idea or this concept is super interesting to me, because I think it defines the purpose that we have. One of the fundamental principles of what we do at Wallam, which is you've got to be aware of yourself in order to then be in relationships, in order to then, change the world. But the next part of it was, well, you've got to help identify what then makes you, part of the asking of yourself is, how do you identify what makes you uniquely yourself? Like there's a thing that only you can bring, right? So everything that makes up you makes you super unique. But I think unless you spend time thinking about that, you can waste a lot of time, years, just going about life, right? And not that it needs to happen immediately, but probably the sooner that you're able to figure out what makes you uniquely you can start contributing.
Yes, I think that uniquely you is interesting, because a traditional human is born, they go to school, they're in this class environment that kind of establishes, we're not in like some sort of society where it's, well, because we both went to Catholic school, right? So there's a little bit of no, you need to be this type of student, this type of person, right? So there's a little bit pushed on you in a sense of like who you're expected to be. Perhaps that's just my experience. But, you go to this structured environment for most of us. Some of us are homeschooled or whatnot, or maybe didn't go to school, or however, structure is different. But like generally speaking, you kind of enter society with like this feeling of who you're expected to be. So that's why teenage years are so difficult, and like finding yourself is so difficult, because there's kind of this like tumultuous time of like figuring out who you are, who you're expected to be, who you want to be, who you strive to be, and then who you really are. And I don't know if, I think that you and I at this point in our lives pretty much know who we are, or we know what our likes are, our dislikes are, our tendencies are, our comfort zones, things like that. But what I will say is I feel like there's a big difference between knowing yourself but also knowing yourself each, let's call it, less than a decade, 5 years.
Phase of your life.
Yeah, every
maybe.
phase of your life is so different.
So then
And then it's like, do you know yourself because you've reflected back on XYZ, and then like that's where you're at? So, I mean, can we really know ourselves?
Well, so again, this is just the thought process of like, I could have built something, I could have written something about this, which is why I was like, but maybe it'd be better as a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Is then, okay, we've established to be uniquely you can start with yourself first. And of course, relationships are important. Mm-hmm. But then how do you help identify what that is? And so there's another person who wrote Atomic Habits, James Clear, which is like this. It's like the best-selling
book.
Yes.
And every bookstore we go into, it's still there, like prevalent in the front.
It's ginormous.
And it's been how many years? Jeez.
It's been a while now. Yeah. It's been a few years. So he was having a conversation, and he was talking about, he's framed it as knowing what you want to optimize for. That's how he framed it. But I was like, but it means the same thing. Knowing yourself, knowing what you want to optimize for. Mm-hmm. You can define things a bunch of different ways, but kind of the same idea is behind it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So he said, the more precisely you know what you want, the better your strategy can be, and the more obvious the actions and the choices that you can take. So you were talking about different phases. As a teenager, it could be your peers that help define who you are. As you get older, we're in our late 40s. There's what you said was that we kind of know who we are, but there's still always like, well, what am I? Okay, I kind of know who I am, but what am I meant to like be doing right now? Mm-hmm. And so these are questions you can ask, and they can definitely take different, because of the different phases you are in your life, the question can be framed slightly differently. Is that kind of what you were trying to say earlier?
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think so. I think earlier what I was trying to get at also is like, I could say I know who I am right now, and then like when I was 30, I could say,
of course,
but it's like if we're not paying. I think what I'm saying is if we're not paying attention to life changes, who we interact with, how that change, like you kind of always have to re-ground yourself, I guess, and re-explore, re-ask yourself these questions. I think this comes into maybe a little bit of a exploration of how do we get to know ourselves. So is it journaling? Is it, like you said, taking note and reflecting on your interactions with others? Is it making a documentary? Is it writing a book? Is it, like what do you do? What are the actions or the things that we do that leads us closer to that, whether it's intentional or unintentional?
Yeah, so this is what's really great about you, and also annoying, because because for the longest time, for how long have we known each other? Almost 30 years. I remember a long time ago, like you said something to me like, wow, you really like reading. You know what? I like just experiencing stuff. This has changed, but this is something I remember, and I remember going, yeah, I guess I don't experience as much and learn from that. I try to learn things from books first and then experience it, but both can be true. But the reason this is annoying is because you're saying a lot of the points that this guy just said.
Okay, so, listeners and viewers, I swear I had no idea what was in this journal.
Yeah. So for example,
Oscar just said, "I got this guy. I got this podcast. I'm gonna cue you up, and you can just talk." This is how he puts it.
And I was right.
I said, "Okay, that's fine."
I was right.
And, I just want everybody to know that the sun is finally in a good position, and so I am.
You can move away from me.
I am cooling down, so it's not as unbearable as it was like 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's not that I just started smelling worse and you're moving away and away from me. But okay, to continue with James Clear.
Okay.
he said, going back to,
Atomic
how do we
Habits,
know,
yes.
not the atomic habits part, but how do we know what to optimize for? How do we figure out the questions that we're asking?
Yes.
However you
What's
define
the method? Yeah.
He said on a blank piece sheet of paper, something that he was experimenting when I heard him on a specific podcast. He writes, "What is it that I want?" And he writes it every single day. And the really cool thing with doing it every day, repetitive, the same question, is that every day it might lead to different responses. The answers can change a bit, maybe not a lot, but they change a bit, and you get more precise. And if you get more precise, then you skip middle steps. I know that I haven't gotten to your answer just yet, but what I'm saying is this is his idea of what to do, right?
Yeah.
Which then you get more precision, which leads to better self-awareness, which goes back to this is one way to answer that question.
Yeah.
The person who is interviewing him is just like you now, as he said, "That's so interesting that you said that, because I feel that you're forcing a function to be more aware, and there's 3 ways to do it: journaling, or writing, mindfulness, investigating your inner self, or conversations with live people."
Yes.
And all 3 of them can get you a more accelerated path. So when you were saying your stuff, I was like, why bother writing stuff down? No, I'm just kidding. But it's always great because I'm also a big fan of hearing the same thing from different people.
Yes.
And so to talk about maybe something that I am trying to be uniquely me about is that I love being a connector of dots to whatever the Wallem vision is.
Yeah.
So I love listening and kind of putting my antennas, the reticular activation system out for like what is being broadcast, and me listening going, okay, how could I use that to help either myself or Mimi or Wallem? I kind of am trying to train myself that way. And so anyone can do that, and then you would be uniquely yourself also. But I'm trying to do that and then have that as be my unique thing that I can offer of value, because I really believe that there's not too many original ideas.
Correct. Yes.
Right? Everything that I've been saying,
contrary to many people's belief on
I
themselves,
came up
I invented this thing,
but
right?
so like even from us reading,
Yeah.
like those the quotes that we read,
Yeah.
right? Those weren't our ideas. We read them, and maybe they'll influence us down the line somewhere, and maybe we'll forget where we got it from. But you have to kind of sometimes. Anyway, that's a whole ego thing. But I think what I do try to do is say, okay, I'm pulling from all these different things. They're not my original ideas, but maybe I can take that idea and say, let's see how we could maybe use this in communication.
So what you're saying is you want to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like, one of those strength finder things, that's always been my number one thing. It's always like, you really like learning.
Oh my God.
So anyway.
It's to almost a fault, I would say. Like,
it's a
you
problem.
have learning ADD. Like, you want to learn so many things. So I was teasing Oscar on this trip as well because, we're also on our trips, it's about our wellness. So O and I are on this trip to kind of get a little bit of a digital detox, a little bit of a detox from the world, from other humans that we tend to give so much energy to so we can rejuvenate. We come off this really, really stressful event. I specifically booked this trip knowing like we would have this ocean behind us for several days at a time. Like crossing the Atlantic to get home is not like a quick thing. It's a slow process. So we did this on purpose, right? So that we would have this time to ourselves to kind of do this. And I'm like, Oscar's like, hey, you know what? We should also, work on this because we've got mobility, and then there's this, and every day there's like 20 new exercises that we need to add on, and I'm like, it's going to be like 24 hours of work to do. But I don't think it's a negative thing. I just think it's funny because there's always more things to add to this list.
Well,
of
let me
learning and fixing.
Let me build on all this stuff. So everything that we just mentioned and that this idea of what is it that I want, writing on a blank piece of paper every single day, and you're writing the same thing over and over again. You've been doing that for almost 90 days. You said about 3 months ago, oh, I know what I need to do. I just need to do my Kung Fu basics. So this idea of what is it that I want, you said to yourself, to help kind of fix some of the issues that I have, I know exactly what I need to do. I just need to do my Kung Fu basics every day. So you've done them every day, which is like in my eye, this is the connecting part,
Okay.
right? That's you writing on a piece of paper the same question. You do, let's say, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. You do it every single day. Every single day, you get a response back that may be similar, but every day might be a little bit different, right? You get little things, but you keep getting more precision. You get better self-awareness, and you learn to skip middle steps. And I saw you doing that. I was like, that's a freaking brilliant idea, which, of course, the easy ideas are not the ones that I always jump to first. I jump to them 5, 10, 20 years later. I started doing that since, I think I wrote down when I started. I started doing it from the 12th. The day we're recording this is the 25th. And in those 13 days, almost 2 weeks, I've learned a lot just doing the basics. It's freaking, I love it. I'm like, this is so awesome.
So,
and the idea of, oh, there are a bunch of steps I can skip now because of this.
So let's kind of clarify this for our listeners and our viewers, right? So what I want, like if you were to ask me, like when I wrote, if this was something I was actually writing, but technically I did because I put it into what Oscar does one-on-one coaching, and he has a My Coach app. And so I basically am like, here's what I want. I want to be able to do all of my basic range of motion of where I expect myself to be able to maintain for the rest of my life. Like there are certain key things I want to be able to physically do forever, and I want to be out of pain doing those things, right? So I want to be able to move into these positions but not in pain. Mm-hmm. Like that was the one, to be out of pain, because I was having so many small injuries that kept adding up that was preventing me from being happy, essentially, right? And so I was like, I want to move out of pain. And then I said, I know what I want to do. So my goal, what I said as my solution was, I know that if I just did my Kung Fu basics, my Wallam Kung Fu basics specifically, so for those of you who are Wallam family out there, it is literally that first 15 to 30 minutes of your classes.
Which, if I could just add, this is not throwing shade on anybody. Okay, because that's not what I'm about. But in the Wallam handbook, it's basically that
page,
order of
yes,
basics.
That order
in that exact order, okay? No offense to anybody out there who's practicing Kung Fu or teaching. You don't have to switch it up. That's what I'm saying. That's the exact order.
Well, there's just a reason also why it's written in our handbook that way. Like we didn't just list it alphabetically or whatever. We listed in that order because I feel that the person who decided that order is credible. And that happens to be my dad, right? And being 87, we saw him grab a stick a week ago, jump around, do what we call monkey walking, like what we have our kids do for mobility, do a kick over a chair, right? Like if I'm 87 and I can touch the ground, stand up, move around, do all those things, I'm gonna be happy. And so I feel like he had always said, we practice our martial arts to better ourselves. In that umbrella, to me, is not just who we are as people, but also physically being able to kind of be healthy our whole lives, right? To lead this healthy lifestyle and being able to move out of pain and physically be active. And so to me, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. Like, yes, there's other little mobility things that I've learned that I try to add in there and whatever. But I was like, I know that if I actually just did my Wallam Kung Fu basics, it would solve a lot of problems. And it has. It has 100% has.
Yeah, the beauty of that is it's similar. It can be exercise, but it is also kind of a brilliant movement screen. The functional movement screen has these 7 fundamental movement patterns.
Yeah.
The Wallam Basics has these kind of fundamental movements for Kung Fu, and
yes.
if you day by day do them, what's really cool is we were talking about it today after we on the cruise ship have breakfast and we go for a little bit of a walk. Then we're like, hey, let's practice our basics. And today you said something like, hey, you know what? I don't feel as flexible today, but I also feel better in this position. So this is the part of, kind of taking that concept of writing on a sheet of paper the same thing every day, doing your basics every day, and getting information.
Yeah, I'd love for you to kind of expand on the test retest thing, and so how you say, okay, if you do excuse me, if you do like a certain set of movements and you do those same ones every day, you're able to kind of gauge where you're at in them. And it doesn't mean everybody like we're ramping up and now I've done 10 kicks to start and now I'm doing 1,000 by the end of 90 days. Some days I do 50, some days I do 10, some days I do 5. Like the morning of the tournament, it was a 5 kick day. Just like I just need to do my grease the groove, which means I'm just going to go through a motion just to kind of have my body be there. Some days I'm kicking at my hip height. Yep. Some days I'm trying to kick as high as I can. Like it doesn't mean you're always amping up. It just means that you're touchstone every day. And so you can almost monitor, wow, that means, you know what, I must have slept bad because my neck is in this position. So when I'm doing this exercise, I feel XYZ. And so, I mean, you always say that in what your fitness world, strength and conditioning, like the test, retest, and like having something to kind of measure is the only way to really,
well, there's different parts of it. If you look at the functional movement screen, you do these 7 movements, and then it's a filter. It kind of it'll give you some things that we need to watch out. It also is another way to think about it is like red light, green light, yellow light. So if these movements are green, good to go. You can do the movements that are associated with that pattern, which could be running or squatting or whatnot. Oh, this is yellow. Proceed with caution. Maybe we need to do some prep work. Right, before you start doing the actual activity. And then red, let's stop there. This doesn't mean you can never do it. It's like, let's figure out what's wrong first. Sometimes that might mean going into a medical professional and figuring things out. Yeah. So then the retest would be, you don't do the whole test every time. You look at where you're red and yellow and it's like, oh, is it moving in the right direction? Or you could then every few months do the whole thing and say, hey, what was green is still green. What was yellow is now green. What was red is now yellow. You're moving in the right direction. If nothing is changing, then what you're doing isn't working. And obviously, if it's going in the opposite direction, then what you're doing is not working. So that's one way to do it. The test retest could actually be, let me try to touch my toes. Oh man, I can't touch my toes today. Okay, you know what? Let me spend just a few minutes rolling out my hamstrings, stretching my calves. Okay, touch my toes. That's my retest. Oh, I can touch my toes now. Great. Now I can keep going. I don't need to then keep rolling out. I can move on. So that's part of the test retest. But the really cool thing with the Wall and Basics is that you can do that set every single day, depending on the time you have, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. But you can continuously be getting information if you're paying attention. And that can be even information as much as like, wow, my ankle is really tight. Before I do my Buddha hand breathing, let me do some ankle prep first. Okay, now I'm good to go. Or it could be, wow, I'm like really distracted. I'm trying to focus on my breath, but I'm not. Why is that? So you can be getting information. But if the goal is, and I can tell you for me, it's like, oh, I need to get better at my Kung Fu and Tai Chi, then this is the best thing to do daily. And so,
Right. I mean, it was kind of like, we've said it like 1,000 times on this podcast when my dad gets asked the questions like, how do you do a split?
Do that.
Practice the split. Yeah. How do you get your stances lower? Practice your stances. He's very, very like, it's so simplified, but there is some truth to it it is as simple as that, but simple doesn't mean easy.
Well, the thing is, we always want shortcuts, and the thing is, I mean, I'm saying this stuff out loud, and I can't believe I haven't been doing this long. I haven't come to this conclusion. It's like, oh, just do this every day. Commit to this every day. I mean, so anyway, this is it's just crazy to me. Like,
well, I think people also right now are backing away or tuning out and going, I don't have time to do something every day, right? And so yes, it's important to have this like consistency, and even if it's like, well, it could be a minute or maybe just 2 of the exercises a day or whatever that means for you. But having spoken to our coach and an amazing coach, Brett Jones, recently on a podcast about how do we meet our goals? How do we get stronger? How do we stay consistent? And he's like, you don't want to look at consistency as a streak. You want to look at it as consistency over time.
He says, and so don't look at consistency in the short term.
In the short term, right.
Look at it over the long term.
Yeah, so I was going to say, you don't want to say, okay, in this month I got 30 days in a row, so I win, or I only got 20, and that means I'm a loser because I only, 10 days were off. He's like, in a year, what was your consistency like? And I think that reframe really is helpful for me because I am very much a checklist or I'm a failure kind of item person. Yeah. And so this is the know yourself piece where if we kind of loop that all together and kind of come full circle is, what do you know about yourself? Like if you have something you are trying to improve at, like how well do you know yourself and like what method do you need to take? So I said I need to do this every day, but the knowing myself part is having grace with myself and allowing myself to know that, hey, if I'm running a tournament and I've got 500 people that I'm responsible for, and I've got out of town people, my sister just got out of the hospital, and all these wrenches are being thrown at me, I need to have a little grace and be like, well, if I don't do my basics today, I'm not going to think I'm a bad person and give myself an X and only focus on that. I need to think about the consistency in the long term and not the short term, like Brett Jones said. So yeah, I think though that reframe was very helpful for me and also allowed me to have grace with myself and say, look, it is okay that you don't do something quote unquote every day. So yes, you say I'm going to do it every day, but it's because you want to have consistency in the long term. Because I think listeners tend to say, well, that's not reasonable for me. I don't have the capacity for that. And it's like, but if you don't try to set the goal to do it, then you end up doing nothing, because most of us tend to be a zero or nothing kind of mentality. I mean, that's generally human nature. Like, well, I'm not going to even bother because it's not attainable.
Yeah, it's so crazy that I've done the same thing as far coach people against doing that, and I've done the same thing. Like, oh, I missed my streak, and then a week go by, and I'm like, why did I let that week go by? So part of it is, oh, I missed a day. Cool, that's fine. Well, what am I going to do tomorrow? And then maybe you get to do it again tomorrow, but maybe not, right? Because life is just like that.
Yes.
But to go back to something that I believe James Clear said, I'm not 100% sure, but I think he said one way to start thinking about, well, what habits can I start doing or maybe stop doing, is say, well, what would a successful person who does that do? So what would someone who's good at Kung Fu and Tai Chi do? Oh, they're the type of person who probably does their basics every day. But that doesn't mean that if you miss a day, it's bad. I'm just saying you can go back and say, well, I do it every day. Okay, well, I missed yesterday, so I won't miss twice. I'll miss this. I'll go the next day. Mm-hmm. So yes, you're right. I think that's a really key point that overachievers like yourself need to be reminded of, that it's not about perfection. It's so cliche, but it's such common sense. But Mike Boyle always says, common sense is
not so common.
So to build on something else, and I'm not exactly sure again who to attribute it to, but then it's like this pattern of like, all right, we want to identify who you are, what makes you unique, what you identified, what you're prioritizing for. You're identifying what is it that I want, whatever it is that you've defined, depending on your phase in life. That answer, your self-awareness answer, right, or question, you figure that out. Well, the next thing is, I believe this is the Michael Gervais guy, the clinical psychologist. He says, okay, now the next step, you celebrate it, which is another step that I think we miss. Mm-hmm. Like the act of, I'm celebrating for you, because one, I jumped on the bandwagon too, right, of doing the basics every day, but I'm like, it's so smart. Like things that are so simple and so smart, and I'm like, so celebrate it. You should celebrate, one, that you decided to do it, and two, that you've had a 90-day streak. But even if you miss a day or two, if you continue going down that path and you go, all right, 365 days have gone by. I've done it 300 times. I missed 60 days. Still, that would be what a win, right? Something to celebrate. Anyway, the next step after that is imagine what it would be like to move around in life tuned to that, to being that type of person. Does that speak anything to you? Like,
to be honest, this kind of whole time you were speaking, when you said, who are you? All I could think about was, who are you? From Inigo Montoya.
Cool. That's
so I was a little distracted because, sidebar, we were also at some of the filming sites for The Princess Bride, my favorite. Mm-hmm. So I think that to actually backtrack and go back to something you were saying that jumped out at me was the celebration part. And I like to say we should celebrate the wins, right? So we should celebrate the wins, not meaning like I win, I've got the 90-day streak, but one, I'm deciding I'm going to do something, and then trying to execute that, consistency in the long term. But then, so it's like I'm doing that and like I'm going straight for the goal, I'm focused, but stopping to take a moment to celebrate that and to celebrate the fact that you're moving in the right direction or trying to do something that is going to benefit you. I think is important, or if you're on a project or something and allowing yourself to take a moment. That is something I have talked about in therapy for years, because I have a hard time of stopping to take a moment to celebrate things and to say, okay, hey, this is a good thing. I'm happy in this moment, and that's okay to feel that and not feel like I'm wasting time or not jumping on to the next thing on the list. And so I think it is a very difficult thing, but to again kind of bring back to writing something down daily, having grace with yourself, celebrating the wins. We used to do a 5-minute journal every day. So it literally is called the 5-minute journal. And part of that is a gratitude journal, right? So it's just like literally you write down the things you're like three things you're grateful for, 3 things. It's just a really simple thing, but in the celebration part, there's also the gratitude part. And if you're feeling gratitude, then generally your mindset is usually in a better place, and it allows you to have the positivity that you need to kind of build that momentum and take you forward in the direction that I think will lead you to whatever that means for you. The word success I don't really like, but that will lead you to a place where you can enjoy being, and where you can feel the benefits of whatever it is that you're accomplishing, but also all of the things, whether it's you and I having a good conversation and being able to kind of like podcast about this, or whether it's, oh my God, I'm out of pain now, and all of the things, right? So it doesn't have to be physical also. It can be a mental thing that you say, okay, I want to take 2 minutes a day to have my gratitude practice. Like all the things that we're doing, like you said, is like comes back to knowing yourself and what does make you uniquely you. And so the things that make us uniquely ourselves, I think, if we know that, we know then our strengths and our weaknesses, and then we can decide which one we're going to be tackling that day or that year or that decade. I mean, one of the things that I think, let's just say this podcast, for instance, we are on vacation, but I still feel this obligation to podcast, but I also enjoy it because you and I get into these really fun conversations. Our 5 listeners that said, we love Me Ask episodes, so keep on that. But ultimately, this is the first year that I really said it's okay if I don't do one every single week. Right. And I'm okay with this. And my patrons are like, it is also okay. I feel so obligated because it's something I committed to, that since 2016 is when I said I was going to do it. 2017, January, it was like, go. I mean, it was every single week except for the last few during the holiday season, and then around Chinese New Year, I had like 4 weeks or something that I didn't have a new podcast for a really long time. And it was just this last year or so that I kind of changed my, I allowed myself the grace to say it's okay that I don't record a new one every single week for my audience or for myself or the commitment I've made. I mean, one is, I don't know if like listeners know, but like, yes, this is not my job. I don't get paid for this. There's no monetization. My patrons are really the only way that this keeps going. I have, a really wonderful team of humans that help edit this, and that's where all those funds go to, and it's very minimal. I don't have like thousands of patrons or anything. The ones that are there are amazing, and it means so much that they believe in me. It makes me feel obligated, right? But like just taking this podcast, for instance, like allowing myself the grace to say, it's okay. Let's look at the consistency in the long term. And if you think about it, I know a lot of people who started a podcast around COVID, and they're like, I'm going to podcast. And then they're like, okay, forget this. This is a lot of fucking work.
Yeah. No, it's a lot.
It is.
So the thing I would say to that is that probably everybody wants less content and more quality. Like, I'd rather have more quality than more content. And, my position on social media, like, I think it's slop. I think it's like slop that pigs eat. So whatever's on. And listen, there's great content on there, right? Like, technically, posting some of this on YouTube can be considered social media as well, right? But we find value in it, and some people find value in it, which I feel is fine. I'm opposed to consuming things just to consume them, like the being fed. That's why I'll never open up a TikTok account. Maybe I will in the future. I don't know, but I have never been on the actual app.
I've never been on the app, but I do have one, and my team takes care of that.
And I think OpenAI came out with an app which is now AI generated content, and I consider that literally probably the lowest calorically valuable type of information nutrition to take.
Yes, yes.
Right.
I mean, there's so much good nutrition to take in, everybody. Think about what we talked about at the beginning of this episode. There are like real humans with so much to offer.
Right. So anyway, this not to disparage anybody who does that, right? Because I'm trying to be less of that type of person. But if you were to do one podcast a month, but you felt like, wow, I really put a lot into it and this is quality, I think anyone who supports you would follow that. And the only reason, in my opinion, to put out more content would only be, like, let's say, for example, I do have this weekly blog post, right, that I do for the Wallem students. The only reason I would do more of that would be not because I feel like anyone needs more, but only because I think it would maybe enhance my skills as a communicator. So that's another reason why you can look positively at you being consistent over the course of the years you've been doing the podcast, of how you've improved on those skills. The last thing, so we talked about the big crux of it, of trying to find out, do this whole self-awareness. You've discovered, you've celebrated, you've thought about, like, what would it be like to be more of this as I move throughout the world. What would that future look like, and also, like, the community aspect. Like, there's the small community of you and I, like, we were trying to improve, and like, if we become better versions of ourselves, then this gets better, but then it spreads out to the Wallem community as well. And so it's just maybe food for thought for anyone who's stayed listening for the past hour, of things to do to try to figure out who you are at, to use your words, whatever phase of life you're in right now.
To kind of just reiterate what you're saying is, and we didn't like go on the rant, but we didn't kind of like go into depth on the community aspect of everything. But you and I's mission, like a lot of the things that we do, is, like you said at the beginning, for the good of Wallem. And when you say that, you do mean the community, because everything with our Wallem family has been what motivates us to kind of propel, to improve as humans, to try to gain more information and knowledge so that we can then pass it on, enhance future generations, and learn from them as well. And I think in my upcoming episode that I'm going to talk a lot about this event that just passed, and the meaning of it, and what it's really had me kind of thinking about over these last couple of weeks since the event happened, and just every time we get together as a family, what that means and what the word family means. So I think for us to know, at the beginning you asked, like, okay, who are you? Do you know yourself? And then I kind of mentioned, well, like, you can't really know who you are if you're just alone all the time. Like, to have that feedback and people around you to question and challenge and bring you up and encourage and celebrate you, all the things that we've talked about, like, it is the community, whether that's you and your partner, whether that's you and your martial arts family, or your immediate family, or your friends, or your group, or your book club. Like, I think it is really important, especially, and it's such an overused phrase to be like, especially right now when we're so polarized and everybody's in their own world, or everyone's like literally talking to AI more than they are regular humans. I think it's so important to have a community. And so those of you listening, you are part of my podcast community, and I appreciate you, and I want to thank you for kind of being a part of that, especially those of you who've been hanging in there from the beginning. You know who you are.
Yeah. I think you can build on this on your next podcast, where you talk about the event and all that stuff. But the last point that I did want to make, but I think it would take us on too far of a tangent, but I'll just touch on, is that there's this line that I think it was James Clear that wrote, and I wrote this down, and I said, to perform at a high level, you need to hold two competing ideas at the same time. And I put question mark, because I liked the line, but I didn't know what it meant. I was like, well, what's an example of this? And later on, it came up with, like, when you step on the stage field, or for us, like let's say the competition mat, and then you step off, you realize, you step on and you realize, I'm going to take this very seriously. This is super important because I put in all this work. But then when you step off on the grand scheme of things, you realize it doesn't truly matter that much because what you just did doesn't 100% define who you are. Like what I just did there, that's not 100% of me, right? I could focus on that, but at the same time, I realized that it's super important and not important. And it would have made me think about this question of two competing ideas at the same time is your whole commentary on the importance of the community part, but you can also at the same time be like, I'm a little bit tired of this community and I need a little bit of a break. You can have both of those ideas, and then, it's just something that I thought of because when I wrote down that question, to perform at a high level, you need to hold two competing ideas at the same time. I was like, what are some examples of that? And by writing that down, I was like, then you can become attuned, to what some of those are. So I don't know, just throwing that out there.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up and leave it there, but would love to hear from all of you about what you're reading, what spoke to you in this, and if you have questions. Thanks so much for listening and for being with us out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, where it is much cooler where I'm sitting now because we are away from the sun. So thanks, everybody. Bye.